SuperFreakonomics, Global Cooling, Patriotic Prostitutes, and Why Suicide Bombers Should Buy Life Insurance by Stephen D. Levitt and Stephen J. Dubner. Picture this. You're leaving a party, feeling pretty good, maybe a touch too good. It's late, you've knocked back a few drinks, and home is calling. Lucky for you, it's only a mile away. You fish out your car keys, but then something makes you hesitate. That responsible little voice in your head pipes up, "Hold on there, buddy, you're definitely not fit to drive." So you do what seems like the smart, grown-up thing. You decide to walk. Your friend gives you an approving nod for being so sensible. After all, friends don't let friends drive drunk, right? But here's a twist that'll make your head spin. What if that supposedly responsible choice actually put you in more danger? What if walking home drunk was significantly riskier than getting behind the wheel? This is exactly the kind of brain-bending question that drives one of the most thought-provoking books in recent memory, SuperFreakonomics. This isn't just a follow-up to the wildly popular Freakonomics. It's a deeper dive, a bolder exploration, and an even wilder ride through what authors Stephen Levitt and Stephen Dubner call the hidden side of everything. The original book captivated millions and flipped economics on its head, proving that the discipline isn't confined to Wall Street spreadsheets and Federal Reserve meetings. It's actually a fascinating tool for decoding human behavior in all its messy, surprising glory. The dynamic duo behind it couldn't be more perfect. Levitt is a brilliant, boundary-pushing economist from the University of Chicago, while Dubner is a masterful storyteller who transforms dense data into riveting narratives. Together, they don't just provide answers, they flip the questions upside down and shake out all the loose change. Today, I'm taking you on a whirlwind tour through SuperFreakonomics. By the end, you'll discover why street prostitutes and department store Santas have more in common than you'd think, how your television might have triggered a massive crime wave, and why the fix for global warming could be as simple as a garden hose aimed at the heavens. Even better, you'll walk away with a fresh perspective, a mental Swiss Army knife for making sense of our beautifully bizarre world. So buckle up. Let's figure out why your friends really shouldn't let you walk home drunk. The beating heart of SuperFreakonomics and everything Levitt and Dubner explore is one deceptively simple truth. People respond to incentives. Sounds straightforward, right? But the real fascination lies in watching this principle play out in the wild. The incentives driving human behavior are often invisible, counterintuitive, and create ripple effects nobody could have predicted. This approach, using cold, hard data instead of moral assumptions or gut feelings to understand why we do what we do, is what they call the economic approach. Let's circle back to that party scenario. You've nobly decided to walk home drunk. Feels responsible, doesn't it? After all, a drunk walker only puts themselves at risk, while a drunk driver becomes a potential weapon on wheels. This is where the authors tell us to pump the brakes on conventional wisdom and actually examine the numbers. Here's what the data reveals. A drunk driver is roughly 13 times more likely to cause an accident than a sober one. Pretty terrifying stuff. Yet the chances of actually getting caught? Shockingly slim. In America, for every 27,000 miles driven drunk, there's only one arrest. You could theoretically drive coast to coast 3 times, plastered the entire way, before you'd likely see those red and blue lights. But what about hoofing it? The statistics show that, mile for mile, a drunk walker is 8 times more likely to die than a drunk driver. Intoxicated pedestrians stumble into traffic, tumble into ditches, or simply collapse on dark roads where they become invisible speed bumps. Sure, drunk drivers endanger others. About a third of drunk driving fatalities involve innocent passengers, pedestrians, or people in other vehicles. But even accounting for those tragic losses, the math delivers a knockout punch. Walking drunk still causes 5 times more deaths per mile than driving drunk. So the authors conclude, with a mischievous glint in their eye, that the truly responsible advice should be, friends don't let friends walk drunk. Obviously, they're not actually advocating drunk driving. This is about teaching us to think differently. It demonstrates how data can reveal truths that run completely counter to our instincts. Our world is packed with these hidden realities, and incentives are usually the skeleton key. Take one of humanity's oldest professions, prostitution. It's a textbook example of a market powered by straightforward incentives. As long as there have been men, they've wanted more sex than they could get without opening their wallets. And there have always been women willing to provide it for a price. A century ago in a city like Chicago, prostitution wasn't just present, it was thriving. A woman in a menial job might scrape together the modern equivalent of about $6,500 annually. But switch careers to sex work? She could easily pull in over $25,000. And women in upscale brothels could rake in the equivalent of more than $75,000. Why such premium wages? Incentives, naturally. Back then, prostitution came with enormous downsides: constant arrest risk, crushing social stigma, and perhaps the biggest cost of all, it virtually eliminated your chances of marriage. To persuade women to shoulder these burdens, the compensation had to be exceptional. The steep price tag directly reflected the steep costs of doing business. Fast forward to today, and the landscape has completely transformed. The authors examine fascinating modern research on Chicago street prostitutes. The data shows that today's typical street prostitute earns roughly $27 per hour. That's still better than comparable low-skill work, but it's a fraction of what their predecessors commanded. So what changed? Why did prostitutes' earnings nosedive so dramatically? The answer is competition, but not from other sex workers. The competition came from every woman willing to have sex without charging. Over the past century, sexual mores have undergone a revolution. The rise of premarital sex, casual hookups, and the now ubiquitous friends with benefits arrangement created a massive influx of free alternatives. For countless men who might have once paid for sex, there was suddenly a free and socially acceptable option. As demand for paid sex declined, prices followed. It's a perfect, if unexpected, economics lesson in supply and demand. The authors joke that if prostitution had a lobbying arm, they'd have fought tooth and nail to criminalize premarital sex, or at least slap heavy taxes on it, just like American steel manufacturers battling cheap imports. The Chicago study unveils even more fascinating insights about this hidden marketplace. For instance, prostitutes engage in what economists call price discrimination, charging different customers different amounts for identical services. White customers consistently paid more than black customers. Why? Different negotiation tactics. With black customers, who typically knew the neighborhood and were more likely to bargain, prostitutes would state a firm price up front. With white customers, they'd often let the man suggest a price first, banking on his generosity or ignorance. It worked like a charm. The research also illuminates the economic value of having a pimp. Turns out, prostitutes working with pimps earn significantly more, even after the pimp takes his cut. Pimps function as marketers, connecting workers with wealthier clients from outside the neighborhood. They also provide protection, reducing robbery and violence risks. The authors compare the value a pimp delivers, the pimpact, to what real estate agents provide. Their verdict? A pimp's services are considerably more valuable than a realtor's. This deep dive into prostitution economics isn't just about exploring taboo territory. It's about revealing that the same economic forces shaping the stock market also shape society's darkest corners. Everyone, from Fortune 500 CEOs to street prostitutes, is responding to a complex web of incentives. And sometimes those incentives trigger consequences that are genuinely bizarre and completely unforeseen. Welcome to one of the universe's most powerful principles, the law of unintended consequences. Consider the great metropolises of the late 1800s, cities like New York or London. They were exploding with growth, but facing a crisis that threatened to literally bury them. It was a pollution catastrophe of epic proportions, an environmental emergency that choked the streets, poisoned the air, and spread lethal diseases. The villain? Horses. We romanticize horses now, but back then they were the city's engines. They hauled carriages, transported construction materials, and delivered goods. New York City alone housed 200,000 horses. Each horse deposited roughly 24 pounds of manure daily. Do the math. That's nearly 5 million pounds of manure covering New York streets. Every single day. It piled up in vacant lots, forming mountains 60 feet high. It lined streets like filthy snowdrifts. Summer brought unbearable stench. Rain created rivers of sewage flooding crosswalks and seeping into basements. Those elegant brownstone stoops weren't just architectural flourishes. They were functional necessities, elevating residents above the literal sea of waste. The manure bred astronomical numbers of flies that transmitted typhoid and other diseases. In 1898, the world's first international urban planning conference convened in New York. Horse manure topped the agenda. After 3 days of debate, the conference gave up. No solution seemed possible. The modern city appeared doomed, suffocated by the very innovation that built it. Then, almost miraculously, the problem evaporated. No government mandate solved it. No mass movement of citizens voluntarily abandoning horses for the greater good. The problem vanished through technological innovation. The horse was replaced by electric streetcars and, crucially, the automobile. The car, which we now consider a major pollutant, was celebrated as an environmental savior. It was cleaner, more efficient, and didn't blanket streets with millions of pounds of waste daily. This story serves as a powerful parable. A seemingly insurmountable problem disappeared because of human ingenuity. The authors use this to frame our contemporary quote, unsolvable crisis, global warming. The cars that rescued the 19th century city now appear to threaten the 21st. But just as people in 1898 couldn't envision a horse-free world, perhaps we're blind to innovative solutions lurking just around the corner. The authors contend that when tackling something as massive as global warming, hoping billions of people will voluntarily change their behavior and sacrifice their living standards is extraordinarily difficult, possibly impossible. It's asking for global-scale altruism. But what if humans aren't as selfless as we'd hope? And what if simpler, cheaper, more effective solutions exist? This brings us to one of medicine's most brilliant yet underappreciated heroes, Ignaz Semmelweis, a Hungarian doctor working in 1840s Vienna. Semmelweis worked at a maternity clinic, where he was haunted by a terrifying pattern. Women were dying at alarming rates from puerperal fever or childbed fever. They'd arrive healthy, give birth, then develop raging fevers, and die. In Europe's finest hospitals, 1 in 6 mothers perished. Semmelweis was a data detective. He noticed something peculiar. His hospital ran 2 separate maternity wards, one staffed by male doctors and medical students, the other by female midwives. The death rate in the doctor's ward was more than double the midwives' ward. Why? He tested every hypothesis. Was male presence somehow toxic? Didn't make sense. Were women more frightened with doctors present? Unlikely. The breakthrough came through tragedy. A colleague cut his finger during an autopsy on a childbed fever victim. He soon developed identical symptoms and died. Semmelweis had his eureka moment. The doctors and students performed morning autopsies, then, after just a quick hand rinse, delivered babies. The midwives never handled cadavers. Semmelweis concluded doctors were transferring, quote, cadaverous particles from corpses to living mothers, infecting them during delivery. This was decades before germ theory gained acceptance. He didn't understand bacteria, but he knew something deadly was being transferred. His solution was stunningly simple and cheap. He mandated that all doctors wash hands in chlorinated lime solution before patient contact. The results were immediate and miraculous. His ward's death rate plummeted to barely 1%. In 1 year, he saved hundreds of mothers and babies. You'd expect Semmelweis to be celebrated as a hero. Instead, he was ridiculed. The medical establishment couldn't stomach that they, esteemed doctors, were causing the deaths. His idea was too simple, too cheap, too insulting to their egos. Semmelweis was forced out and eventually died in a mental asylum, broken and forgotten. It's heartbreaking, but instructive. The solution to enormous, complex problems is often shockingly simple and inexpensive. We get so fixated on elaborate, expensive approaches that we miss the obvious. The authors argue this is exactly what's happening with global warming. The problem is framed as an epic moral crisis requiring revolutionary behavioral changes and trillions in spending. But what if, like the horse manure crisis or childbed fever, there's a simpler, cheaper fix? Enter Nathan Myhrvold, Microsoft's former chief technology officer, and his team of brilliant mavericks at Intellectual Ventures. These polymaths delight in tackling the world's thorniest problems. They've set their sights on global warming. They argue current approaches, carbon taxes, cap and trade, driving less, are too little, too late, and too optimistic. Even if we stopped all carbon emissions immediately, existing atmospheric CO2 would continue warming the planet for over a century. So they look to an unlikely inspiration: volcanoes. In 1991, Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines erupted spectacularly, launching 20 million tons of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere. This created a hazy particle veil that functioned like planetary sunscreen, reflecting sunlight back to space. For 2 years afterward, the entire planet cooled by roughly 1 degree Fahrenheit. A single volcano temporarily reversed a century of warming. This sparked an idea for Myhrvold's team. Why wait for volcanoes? Why not create the same effect ourselves? Welcome to geoengineering, and their proposal is breathtakingly simple yet audacious. They call it the garden hose to the sky. The concept: build an extremely long, lightweight hose, about 18 miles, suspended by high-altitude balloons. This hose would pump liquid sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere, where it would mist out and replicate Pinatubo's cooling effect. How much sulfur dioxide would be needed? About 100,000 tons annually to cool the entire northern hemisphere. Sounds massive, but it's actually tiny. Less than 1/20th of 1% of the sulfur dioxide we already emit yearly from vehicles and power plants. The difference is leverage. A small amount of stratospheric sulfur creates massive cooling. The cost? They estimate the entire project could be built and operated for roughly $250 million. For perspective, that's less than what Al Gore's foundation spends just raising awareness. It's a solution thousands of times cheaper than mainstream proposals. They have other concepts, too. One involves fleets of unmanned, wind-powered boats sailing the oceans, creating fine seawater mist. This salt spray would form brighter, more reflective marine clouds, soggy mirrors, as one inventor described them, that would also cool the planet. These ideas spark controversy, naturally. Critics see them as dangerous hubris, playing God with climate. But the inventors see it differently. We're already geoengineering the planet, just accidentally and harmfully. Their solutions represent intentional, intelligent intervention. They're not replacements for clean energy development, but rather life-saving insurance policies. Cheap, simple fixes to buy time, if worst-case climate scenarios materialize. It's the same pattern repeated. A seemingly impossible problem, a chorus insisting it can't be solved, then a clever, often simple solution that changes everything. This thinking style, questioning assumptions and following data, applies everywhere. The book even explores whether economic laws are uniquely human by studying another species entirely. Yale economist Keith Chen posed an unusual question: could he teach monkeys to use money? He worked with capuchin monkeys, which he describes as having small brains focused primarily on food and sex. First, he taught them that small silver discs could be exchanged for treats like grapes or apple slices. It took months, but they learned. They had budgets of 12 coins and could shop for food from researchers. Then he started experimenting. He changed prices. What if one coin now bought one apple slice instead of two? The monkeys reacted like humans. They purchased less of the expensive item. They understood sales and price increases. They behaved rationally. Then Chen tested for irrational behavior. He created 2 gambling games. Game 1. Monkeys saw one grape, and a coin flip determined whether they kept that grape or won a bonus second grape. This framed the outcome as a potential gain. Game 2. Monkeys saw 2 grapes, and a coin flip determined whether they kept both or lost one. This framed the outcome as a potential loss. Mathematically, both games offered identical average payouts. A perfectly rational creature wouldn't care which game they played. But humans exhibit powerful loss aversion. Losing something hurts much more than gaining the same thing feels good. Amazingly, the monkeys showed identical bias. They strongly disliked the game where they might lose a grape and heavily preferred the game where they might gain one, despite identical odds. Chen found the monkeys' financial decisions were statistically indistinguishable from typical human stock market investors. The line between human and monkey economic behavior was blurring. Then one day, chaos erupted. A monkey staged a bank heist, quote, grabbing an entire coin tray and flinging it into the main cage. Researchers scrambled to retrieve coins, but the monkeys refused to surrender them. They understood the coins had value. During this chaos, Chen witnessed something incredible. A male monkey approached a female, handed her a coin, and they immediately had sex. Afterward, the female took her earnings and walked over to buy a grape from a researcher. It was the first documented instance of monkey prostitution. The university promptly shut down the experiment. Authorities feared introducing a full-money economy would corrupt the monkeys' social structure. They were probably right. If the first innovation is prostitution, imagine what follows: monkey theft, monkey inequality, maybe even monkey politicians promising reforms. The story is hilarious but also profound. It suggests basic economic principles, incentives, markets, even irrational biases, aren't just human constructs. They might be hardwired into us at a much deeper, more primal level. Monkeys, it turns out, are people too. So what's the ultimate takeaway from all this? What's SuperFreakonomics really teaching us? It's not just a collection of quirky stories about sex workers, terrorists, and monkeys. It's a lens for viewing the world. The authors are handing us X-ray glasses that let us look past surface appearances, the headlines, moral outrage, conventional wisdom, and see the hidden architecture of incentives actually running the show. The world often feels chaotic and random. People do seemingly crazy things, and problems appear unsolvable. But this book teaches us there's almost always underlying logic. It may not be logic we like, but it exists. People aren't simply good or bad. They're people, and they respond to incentives. Understanding this is genuine power. When you're young, you're trying to decode how everything works. Why do your parents make certain rules? Why do friends act particular ways? Why is society structured like this? This book offers a powerful framework for that discovery. It teaches healthy skepticism, not cynicism, but curiosity, to ask questions, to demand evidence, to not just accept the story you're told, but dig for the story behind the story. Think about practical ways to apply this thinking in your own life. First, whenever something puzzles you, ask yourself, what's the incentive? Why did your teacher design the grading system that way? What incentive structure exists? Why did that company launch that weird ad campaign? What behavior are they trying to trigger? Once you start hunting for incentives, you'll spot them everywhere, and the world becomes much clearer. Second, always watch for unintended consequences. When you hear politicians propose new laws, or school principals announce new rules, think 3 steps ahead. This rule aims to achieve X, but what might it accidentally cause? Could it create perverse incentives that make things worse? This second-level thinking is rare and incredibly valuable. Finally, be willing to challenge your own common sense. We all carry beliefs that feel obviously true, But as the drunk walking story reveals, data can tell radically different stories. Stay humble enough to admit your intuition might be wrong. Stay curious enough to seek evidence. That was a summary of SuperFreakonomics by Levitt and Dubner. We've explored some mind-bending ideas today, but honestly, a summary only scratches the surface. The real magic happens when you experience the book yourself. It's in those quiet moments when a particular story or simple phrase hits you unexpectedly. This podcast helps you decide if a book deserves your time and attention. If anything today sparked your curiosity or shifted your perspective even slightly, I promise the full book is an experience that'll stick with you for years. There's a link in the show notes. Also, if you found this summary valuable and want to continue exploring ideas from the world's most powerful books, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It tells us we're on the right track and ensures you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book. Let's keep learning and growing together.